Since the first war that came, everything changed, and none was ever the same. Stories of how life was like before were pure peace and happiness. All kinds of species were loved and welcome. But as of now, for millennials, peace never came to any soul. And what was left was only chaos, bloodshed, wars, and of such violence. Anything that lived could barely survive. Scavenging for even a bit of food was and could only be called very dangerous to do so. All mythical creatures had turned against humans, as humans against everything. Learning about everything of my past ancestors, most of it learned wasn't such a bright thing to find out. Many of my ancestors drove into battle, but many did not return. My own mother once told me when she was only 4 years old did she meet her great-great-great-grandmother, whose grandparents were the first settlers here where we live. Hearing my mother telling me this story of when I was only 9. Our royal bloodline did not always live here, but moved here after the huge war that practically destroyed my great-great-great-great-grandparents' kingdom. Everything was destroyed, and barely did anyone survive. This story was a true dark one, with such a burden to hear how much they burdened of lost ones, and had to find a different place to settle once again. The old hag always had told me many different kinds of stories, truths, and myths. But there was only one myth story, I'll say, that I learned at a very young age, that I could not keep away from. A story too real of detail, and with curiosity it drove me into. A real story?
Yeah. Not one of those boring stories that you normally come up with.
Hey, don't insult your mother like that. Alright. Fine, you little brat. I'll tell you a real story. A myth. A legend passed down by generations. A tale you want to know? A myth to be spoken of. Long ago, in the biggest, liveliest city of the world, known called as Mythisteria, lived a beautiful young girl, only of 8 years of age. Name of hers of a tongue melody known as Medusa, Wayan, and Mankindin Boltakan. Her fullness of beauty was no greater than anything. Silk flow of hair and sparkle of pureness in her eyes. This young girl may have seemed beautiful and poor, but she was a very mean youngling, a lass that only caused trouble. Very prideful of her beauty, would she only take advantage of. To steal bread, and steal almost anything she could get her hands on. The lass was the hugest and biggest thief and liar, getting away with everything. The whole city was happy, but she was boiled with anger, wanting to be the one to have proper clothes and fine jewelry. She was never happy, nor was she filled with any peace, only filled with darkness and jealousy. Aphrodite did not like this girl, because of her major beauty being used for selfish reasons, but because of what wrongs she was doing. As years went by, and as the girl grew, so did her pride and wrongdoing. No one is sure how it ended to go to be like this. But Athena, and Aphrodite grew dark with heart and cursed Medusa. Slowly, with everything becoming angry against each other, a huge war suddenly raged out of control. None know of how it really started. Medusa was 14 when she changed. The curse that was placed on her consumed everything, completely changing her. The power of this curse, too powerful, it turned her whole body to still ash and nature, ripping her very soul from her mortal body and did her spirit. The statue of her mortal body became only nothing but a forgotten regret. The ash statue was covered in nature. Still mortal hair became covered with wee little leaves. But as for her soul, transforming her from the deepest of her spirit, she completely changed into something completely different. A monster. With a heart so dark, as she was cruel. Her cruelty overwhelmed everything over her, being so much more heartless and angry. Her white spirit soul that was ripped apart from her body transformed in such a fast rate, in such fast in size. Terrifying, big, slithering live snakes grew out from her head. Her empty white sockets became almost like dark snake eyes of sluts. Her pretty smile turned into a snarl of hissing, sharp canines. The young and once beautiful mean girl had changed and turned and cursed into the worst, horrible, darkling known to man. An ancient gorgon monster. Now, who is named as Medusa? She roams a lone place, far from all that lives, far away from all kinds of living. Ever since the change churn, everyone turned to stone from the angered, ugly serpent's sight. Medusa had then since became nothing but a very dangerous harm to society. A death threat to everyone. A monster. Millennials passing, it has been said that she still lives to this very day, seeking a new life. To stone. Forever.
Wait, is that it? Isn't there more stories about the ancient gorgon monster? There has to be more.
Looks like someone's interested in this story now. There is more, but not tonight.
Oh.
You've already stayed up too late. It's past your bedtime.
No, Tommy.
Katsuki, bed, now.
No.
Bakugou, listen to your mother.
Okay.
That night, I could not sleep. My mind constantly thinking about that myth story old hag told me. It left me intrigued, and I wanted to know more. So every night when I had the chance, I would always ask her to tell me the same story over and over again. Many had thought it was because I had fantasies about it every night, or that I became very obsessed with it. But all those stupid extras are missing the mark. This story holds many secrets and doors, like something is missing, but mainly, it sounds way too real, way too detailed to be made up, or to be remembered the same for millennials. Even so, I asked the old hag where she found the story from. The stories she made up are short and lame, so I knew that she did not just make that myth story up. But when she tells me that the story she found out was from someone else, or whatever, the stories were way more entertaining to listen to, but not as much as the myth Medusa story. All she told me was that it was a very old folks tale that just somehow managed to pass down for hundreds of years. Through my ears and eyes, this story can't just be made up. What you read of a story isn't all of it, but so many other things happened. And the many other things that had happened, that is it. From the story, ever since the huge first war ever and Medusa turning, all mythical animals suddenly turned against all humans, which is what's going on right now. Then the fact that ever since that first war that bursted into the surface of the world, that everything changed, and the wars that since what happened to Medusa kept on coming back, to every battle more darker than the last, wars that still go on to this day. I could go on a whole list of things that connect like a chain to this myth old folktale. Many have ended to think I was going to such nonsense, making up such false things, and that I only were wasting time on something that did not even exist, that weren't true. But if it weren't true, how do I feel so drawn to this myth story? No, not drawn like a little brat eyeballing a piece of candy. Drawn into, as in it is literally pulling me into it, like something in my heart is trying to tell me something, even though my brain is only denying it. Once, when I was 10, that old hag showed me a very old painting. One glance was enough to convince me that the myth story my people keep on saying really is true. Like from the story of the town and how the city looked like, perfectly, incredibly, truly, and amazingly matched the painting. Ever since I've heard of the story, I was determined to learn more, even finding myself playing with the wooden sword when I was young, having a huge imaginary of fighting the huge monster, being a great, tall, handsome prince, a knight, a hero, and soon a king. Soon enough, I found myself learning many skills, many spells and weaponry, strategy and cleverness. The story, the painting, Medusa, it all clicked in my head. There was absolutely no denying it. I knew it was real, and nothing was going to stop me from completing my ultimate goal. So I trained, every day, for months and years. Getting stronger as years went by, I grew taller, built stronger, and gained many new skills. I took on a griffin and slayed it only at the age of 13, and led a whole battle on my own at the age of 15. Only in just a few months I climbed the charts and accomplished many things, also many of that was impossible to others. And eventually, before I knew it, it did not soon pass. When I had officially turned 16, finally reaching the age where I could officially take the throne my father had left for me. But there was one last thing I needed to do, something I needed to take care of before taking on the throne. And that was to prove everyone wrong, and that the story really is true. And by proof, by showing them the very head of Medusa I will slay. Finally, I was ready. When the time finally came for me to depart, I gave the old hag one last hug before I set off, finally beginning my journey. Setting out into the wilderness with everything that I needed, a torch in my hand lighting the way in the dark forest, the moon up above shining in the darkness, along with the millions of stars that twinkled in the night. As my hand held the torch to light the way, my other hand held onto something very special, an ancient map. It was not in a language I knew, but it was special, and the very reason why was because it showed the true pathway to the ancient city, the kingdom that thrived since the very beginning, Mythisteria, the very place where no living soul thrived, the very ruins of Mythisteria, where she roamed. Days and weeks passed quickly as I traveled further and further away from my very own kingdom. I knew that Mythisteria was lights away, and that this very journey was going to take a very long time, maybe 2 years at most. But that never stopped me from pushing forward. Month by month flew just like that, days almost repeating on end. Marching, studying, hunting, camping, and everything. Some nights when I could not sleep, I would sit near the fire, studying the map. The very language was Greek, that of ancient tongue. I knew this only because old hag told me. I tried many times in hopes to at least read the strange language, but I had no luck. The further I traveled, it was not long before something felt different. As my journey only continued, by now a full year had gone by. My 17th birthday came and went. The further I traveled, since I had now officially been traveling for over a year, I knew something had changed. I was getting closer and closer to the very city no man dares to enter. The farther I went, the more the forest began to change. Flowers back where I lived were most kingdoms laid about. Flowers were simply the size of a hand. But the ones laid about here were now almost the height as me. Grassy were wild, like and long. Bushes that seemed to increase in size the further I traveled. To the point, I witnessed something beautiful. The forest glowed to life once the sun vanished. The forest filled with a different kind of life. At night, it looked so magical. Was I getting distracted? I couldn't tell. Something felt different inside, but I couldn't place my finger on it. But everything that was new for me that I had never seen before caught my attention. By now, a whole year and 10 months passed by, and at that point, now I knew what was wrong with me. Why I felt off. I felt different. A feeling inside my very heart, feeling a faint glow inside. For some reason, I never had to pause to drink water, or even crazier, hunt for food. Something was wrong with me. Something awakened inside I just couldn't figure out. Me? If so, what was it? Why was my body acting different? I was a prince, a dragon soul, not some immortal god. A greater pull itched inside my very heart that I only grew stronger the more I continued. What the hell's going on with me? Eventually, 2 years officially passed. Coming face to face upon something, the very first sign that gave me hope and fear was the stone of a deer, fear frozen on its face. Suddenly, only then made me realize, how have I not noticed it before? There were no such sounds of any animals, nor any sighting of any living thing, as there is only wind and the sound of Mother Nature, as well as the distant flows of water. The very thought that crossed my mind sent a huge chill down my spine. I was close, very close, to the very ancient city no living being stepped inside for over hundreds of thousands of years. The stones, the poor animals. She did this. I had to take a pause, and actually take a moment to let it all sink in. I always told myself this myth story really was real, but to actually witness something like this made me pause. I had to take a deep breath, taking a moment to regain my composure before I kept going. It all shocked me to the core, seeing many kinds of ancient creatures, the kinds that were always told from folklore and legends that no longer existed. Some that even made me stumble when my eyes lay upon it. First were fawns, centaurs, then unicorns. All creatures almost trying to run away from something. Someone. A chill ran down my back, but I moved on. The forest that now had turned into an ancient jungle, making it harder for me to pass, made me feel like I was puzzling over it like a jaguar, climbing and jumping over a lot of trunks and vines and huge roots. The trees itself were so tall that it looked like they were touching the very clouds. My hands pushed the huge leaves and plants to get by. Everything, including majority of the stones were covered in moss and vines. It made sense how Mother Nature took over. The more I continued on, the more stones passed, all facing one way as if trying to run from something. I had to squeeze and duck and jump over them as they now were too much to simply walk past. Huge vines and leaves blocking the way. Gigantic leaves blocking my path. With the huff, I lifted my hands and parted them. The sudden brightness of the sun caused me to shut my eyes before the sun settled. And by opening my eyes, I saw it. Mythisteria. The view that lay before me was breathtaking. Despite the ruins, waterfalls that poured down the walls down the mountains, and Mother Nature that had taken over it all. Most of Mythisteria still stood proud. The myth story being told of how all buildings were made of fine gold, marble and diamond. It was all here. It really did exist. After traveling for so long, I finally made it. I couldn't think. I couldn't process. But before I knew it, my feet moved on their own. Rocks were kicked as I quickly skidded down the steep hill, wasting no time as I made my way past the huge ruins of an arch, running up the stone stairs as fast as I could, until finally reaching the top. I had to take a moment to catch my breath before lifting my eyes to gaze the view around me, taking it all in. The sight, the ruins, the stones. But now, I was left standing there, confused. Where was the war? Where were all of those dead stone bodies? Where was all of the broken ruins and the sight so horrifying that it would give even a grown man nightmares? This place, Mythisteria, none of it matched the legend the old hag told me. This place, not even the slightest bit of struggle showed. I felt so confused. I carefully made my way further, still cautious and tense. My hands clenching onto my sword held in the sheath. I couldn't think. I didn't understand. Everything and everyone looked so happy. There was not even one sign of violence. Nor gore statues, frozen screams or fear. Nothing. But of only the opposite. Of pure joy and frozen laughter. A time when all there is only pure joy and peace, simply frozen forever. My eyes narrowed, my eyebrows furrowing, slowly making my way further, passing many places, gazing upon many things. The more I saw, the more I became confused. More and more questions piling up one after another, overwhelming my mind. Then, how? What truly happened here then? And if she didn't, then what? Suddenly, it wasn't long before I stumbled into a place I never thought I would find. In the center of it all, covered in ash and beauty, with the shade over me with only a soft kiss of light on her. In ash and nature and moss, and in stone of what was left, was Medusa's human corpse. My eyes widened, my stiff shoulders relaxing, my hand clenching the sword but releasing. She looked so beautiful. Her frozen corpse face didn't show anger, rage, frozen screams or rage, but of only peace. Her eyes closed, with the peaceful, relaxed face. What really happened here?